Well, we have another shocking story for you today. It relates to organ harvesting of the organ donor system, and abuse of the organ donor system, I should say. This in from the HHS this week. HHS finds systemic disregard for sanctity of life in organ transplant system. Someone that has been a regular guest of this broadcast, John Fleetwood, an amazing researcher, is all over this story. He joins us now to give us the gruesome details and explain how this is a positive shift for the American people, and hopefully it'll have a flow on effect worldwide. Here's John now. John Fleetwood, thank you so much for joining us today. We're grateful to have you back on.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Maria.
Always a pleasure. Well, thank you for all of your research. I follow your Substack very, very closely. I encourage everyone to do the same. This latest story is an absolute shocker. And mind you, some of us have known that this has been going on for a very long time, but now the scandal is blowing up and you've written about it. Talk to us about this. This is unbelievable.
Yeah, this is probably one of the more disturbing stories I've seen in a while, Maria. And the bulk of my work is looking at, bioweapons development and where they're doing gain of function all over the world and the implications of that. And this really disturbed me because it's now official. This isn't speculation or some quote unquote conspiracy theory that hospitals are harvesting organs even when patients are showing signs of life. And this comes from, it's the top health organization in the United States. This is the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services under the leadership of Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who, by the way, maybe we'll talk about in a minute, all the wins. Uh, I feel like he's been scoring in his short tenure so far, but under Kennedy's tenure, he on Monday, HHS on Monday announced, quote, a major initiative to begin reforming the organ transplant system. It's like, oh my gosh, organ transplant system in the U.S. needs reforming. And this was following an investigation by its Health Resources and Services Administration, the HRSA, that revealed this is a quote, disturbing, HHS is saying this, disturbing practices by a major organ procurement organization. And here's a quote from Secretary Kennedy. He said, our findings show that hospitals allowed the organ procurement process to begin when patients showed signs of life, and this is horrifying. Kennedy actually said that. This is horrifying. And then he went on to say, the organ procurement organizations that coordinate access to transplants will be held accountable. The entire system must be fixed to ensure that every potential donor's life is treated with the sanctity it deserves. So, HRSA had directed this group called Organ Procurement and Transplantation Network, OPTN, to reopen. Again, this is another quote from the HHS press release, a disturbing case involving potentially preventable harm to a neurologically injured patient by the federally funded, this is our taxpayer dollars, Organ Procurement Organization, OPO, serving Kentucky, Southwest Ohio, and parts of West Virginia. The release indicated that the Biden administration saw that the OPTN's Membership and Professional Standards Committee, they closed that case, and in their words, without action. So Trump comes in, Kennedy comes in, and under Kennedy's leadership, they reopen the case. And it says in the press release after Kennedy's leadership was underway, HRSA demanded a thorough independent review of the OPO's conduct and the treatment of vulnerable patients under its care. HRSA's independent investigation revealed a clear negligence after the previous OPTN board of directors claimed to find no major concerns in their internal review. No major concerns. And this is where it gets really disturbing for me. HRSA, they examined 351 cases where organ donation was authorized, but ultimately not completed. And it found this. 103 cases, representing about 30%, showed concerning features. This is a quote from HHS: concerning features, including 73 patients with neurological signs incompatible with organ donations. And this is the worst part: at least 28 patients, so that's 10% of these cases that they looked at, 28 patients, this is a direct quote, may not have been deceased at the time of organ procurement, or at the time the organ procurement process was initiated. And they said that this raises serious ethical and legal
You're
questions.
telling
So
me.
yeah, it's I laugh, but it's only because it's one of the most macabre things I think you can think of, Marie. I mean, I don't know what would be worse. I mean, maybe being set on fire and suffering through that might be worse. But imagine being on an operating table, and they've put all these medicines in you, and you can't feel, not that you can't feel, but you can't move, you can't say anything, you can't speak, so you're completely paralyzed. And then these surgeons start cutting you open and removing your organs while alive. And I went on to, I was curious, like, Maria, you think about this stuff and you hear about it in like far off lands, Eastern Europe, this
Right.
happens, or somewhere in Russia or somewhere in China,
Yeah,
this
you wake up
happens.
in a bathtub of ice without your kidneys, or some hospitals that don't have the oversight in Uzbekistan or something. This is happening in America.
Exactly. You think this is happening somewhere far away, but this is happening in America, and in such a large amount of cases that now HHS is getting involved. And I asked Perplexity, which is just kind of a mainstream Google on artificial intelligence steroids, and it said human trafficking for organ removal is a growing but underreported crime. So this, when I hear underreported, reminds me of, adverse events for vaccines. That HHS Harvard Pilgrim report confirmed that less than 1% of vaccine adverse events, including deaths and hospitalizations, are even reported in the first place. You have to take any number they give you and put two zeros after it. Then you get a closer number to how many vaccinations are linked to adverse events. In other words, that HHS document confirmed that adverse events from vaccines are underreported. Well, you have that, which is very concerning, and it's something that drives my reporting. I'm always thinking about that HHS report showing the underreporting for adverse events for vaccines. I'm always thinking about that. And now this is very much like that, because even a mainstream artificial intelligence is confirming that this human trafficking for organ removal, it's growing but underreported, where individuals are often vulnerable and poor. They're coerced or deceived into giving organs, usually kidneys, under the false pretenses such as claims of that kidneys can regenerate or that there will be no harm. This artificial intelligence said organ trafficking networks involve corrupt medical professionals. Trust the science, trust if they're in a white coat and they have a stethoscope around their neck, you got to trust them. Well, it's those same professionals who are allowing this and exploiting this. They exploit socioeconomic disparities. So, the left should be all over this as well,
Right.
offering victims small payments, sometimes just a few $1,000s. And then this was the interesting thing that ties back with the HHS report, talking about how this is going on a government federally funded level. It said that in the US, there have been, it said, disturbing allegations, though unproven, of premature organ recovery from patients still showing signs of life on life support. And it said, revealing systemic, ethical, and procedural risks in the organ transplant system. But it's funny because AI hasn't caught up with this HHS report. So it's AI, and when it just kind of searches mainstream, it calls them disturbing allegations, but it says it's unproven. But now with this HHS report coming from our top, U.S. health agency, Americans are at risk of having their organs removed if they get into some kind of accident
Yeah.
when they're still alive. So it's just very disturbing.
Extremely disturbing. You mentioned that RFK Jr. has had some wins recently. I'd like to talk to you about that. There's also the story that came out that, while he was on vacation, decision was made to give full approval to the shots for babies. So do have some questions around that, like why is Marty Makary still employed? But just on this particular topic, that now that there have been major reforms that are being proposed after finding these severe oversight failures. Just it was actually on HRSA that you're writing about, that they ordered national safety changes requiring OPTN to report donation stoppages, strengthen procurement policies, and ensure families receive full and accurate information. And HHS Undersecretary Kennedy is overhauling a broken organ donation system to prioritize patient safety, informed consent, and trust. And that's really important because I'm
Yeah.
seeing all over social media since this bombshell came out that people are saying I am making sure that I am not on the organ donor list until this is fixed, until we have assurance that this isn't going to continue. You've got to really remove the financial incentive, in my opinion, to remove this process continuing. It's not just about oversight; it's actually de-incentivizing these hospitals from doing this. You shouldn't need to get a bonus every time you remove an organ. It's just the right thing to do if an organ's available, the person is not still alive, and you can save someone else's life with it. This is just my train of thought, John.
I completely agree. And you mentioned all the, the ways they're going to be reforming the system now under Kennedy, whereas before under the Biden administration, they were ignoring these or enabling these cases, which is truly terrifying. But it is good that we have someone like Kennedy who now is at the helm. And he has, as you mentioned earlier, I think got a lot of wins under his belt. You mentioned uh, before I list just what I see as some really good things Kennedy's been doing. You mentioned that the FDA approved Moderna COVID shot for kids. That approval happened behind Kennedy's back, and then two HHS aides were fired. I'd like to see Kennedy come out with an official statement saying that that's what happened, that
Right.
that's why those firings happened. I think it's still unclear, but regardless, yeah, this is something that, well, I will say that the FDA came out recently. This was, I believe, yesterday. They put out a statement with the Epoch Times where they said that they sort of they wanted to push back against the idea that Kennedy would even have any power to do anything if the FDA had approved, and if Kennedy wanted to stop it, would he have even been able to do anything? I thought that was sort of interesting, and I think kind of shows there's still some, and we would expect this if Kennedy's, legitimate, which by all means it looks like he is. There's still some internal struggles, I think, going on there between Kennedy's leadership and then the rest of these, three-letter health departments.
Look, John, I did look
Um,
into it. There are many things that he can do. There are procedural things that he may be able to do, and there are also legal avenues that he can pursue. So
uh,
it's not a foregone conclusion. It's not like, oops, this is irreversible. No, that's just not true. And as the head of the HHS, he can say this because the procedure wasn't followed. Perhaps he could say, I'm putting a pause on this until we get correct approvals or correct answers or whatever the case may be. There are steps that he could take. So I'm a little bit cautious to say that this is definitely as it is. Like you, I'd like to see a statement at bare minimum, as well as some repercussions for Marty Makary if that's the case, because he's the head of the FDA. How can people under your leadership be doing this? Maybe Marty Makary needs to make a statement.
right.
Just relying on some people saying this on the internet, I'm not fully there yet, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I do see Kennedy's doing some great things. He just signed today, the breaking news coming out of HHS is that he signed that ACIP vaccine panel. He signed that recommendation to take mercury thimerosal out of all vaccines. I
Yes.
thought he was maybe just going to take them out of some of the children's. But if you read through the press release carefully, and I even checked it through, different AIs just to be, double and triple sure, this applies to any vaccine, any flu vaccine that contains mercury thimerosal, which is toxic, from vaccines. So that's, another feather in his cap. Before that, Kennedy blocked the World Health Organization, what he called a Trojan horse
Yes.
emergency powers treaty that I know you've been covering at length.
Yes.
And he warned about, what he called global medical surveillance of
Yes.
every human being. So I think that's a win for Kennedy, although it's a little weird. I argue with myself, as we should. We shouldn't just sort of idolize somebody and just take all the things they do. Oh, these everything they do is great. I know the U.S. has sort of on paper pulled back from the World Health Organization, even sort of at large, but I know for a fact they've put out statements confirming that they're still participating in, for example, bird flu seminars with the WHO.
Yes.
So even though they've sort of given off the impression that they've totally pulled back from the World Health Organization, I don't know that they have, and so I'm not sure how powerful a move in reality this was, that Kennedy put out that official statement saying we want nothing to do with these emergency powers, because the U.S. had sort of already on paper pulled back.
I can say, I'll just interject, it was very powerful.
Yes.
The reason being because the international health regulations are legally binding. And what happened was that if America did not reject the proposed amendments to the IHR, then it would have been, and we were warning about this, even though President Trump said that we were going to exit the WHO, if we didn't reject the proposed amendments, then America would have essentially been locked in a process where even if they give their official notice to the WHO that they're not going to go along with this, they would have been locked in for a period of several months before they can even exit the WHO or exit the legal requirements of the IHR. So it was actually a huge deal. Every country should be doing the same, because these last proposed international health regulations essentially say the WHO has control over all of your health. And I won't get into all of the aspects, but basically mandates, lockdowns, all of this sort of stuff would have been legally binding per the WHO's dictates had Kennedy not done this. So it's a really big deal, and we want to give him credit where credit is due. I think there's still a lot more work that needs to be done, but certainly these positive things that you've highlighted today should be applauded. We should always give credit where it's due and never be afraid to hold them accountable, which is why I really appreciate your work, because you have that balance down pat. I could talk to you all day, John, but we're out of time. I want to direct everyone to your Substack, johnfleetwood.com. That's johnfleetwood.com. Subscribe, support John's work. He's amazing. And also sign up. Follow him on X as well, at John M. Fleetwood. That's John M. Fleetwood on X. John, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it. And maybe we'll get a more in-depth discussion with you soon about some of the things that Kennedy's doing.
Absolutely. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you. Life can be pretty unpredictable, filled with good days and not so good days, and sometimes the only difference between the two is your level of preparedness. The Jace case lets you be better prepared for whatever comes your way. It contains emergency antibiotics and other prescription medications that can literally save your life. Jace makes emergency antibiotics and medicine simple. You can buy directly from them. They have a doctor on staff that approves the prescriptions. There are lots of different reasons why you would need these on hand. Maybe you're traveling across the world. Maybe you're going camping. Maybe you live in a remote area or there's a new pandemic. Maybe you just want emergency medication in case of an emergency. Emergencies don't wait, but you can be ready for them. With Jace, you can have everything you need in one case. Why wait? Order your Jace case today and get 5 life-saving antibiotics and 5 vital symptom relief medications. The Jace case includes treatments for over 150 conditions, and you can even customize your case to suit your needs. Now you can also order additional life-saving ivermectin or compounded ivermectin and mebendazole to give you a combined effect to effectively treat a range range of conditions. From travel cases, seasonal allergies, and even UTIs, Jace Medical has you covered with their custom kits. Order today at jacemedical.com and use promo code DailyPulse for $15 off the Jace case, plus get an additional $50 off a second case or their kid case. Fill out a simple online form for an evaluation from a board-certified physician. Your medication will be sent directly to your home from Jace's pharmacy network, and you can even send your physician a message for answers to any treatment-related questions anytime. Again, that link is jacemedical.com, and remember to use promo code DailyPulse.